Okay, this slideshow I've entitled Acing the Argument FRQ. Argument FRQ is really the most challenging FRQ of the three, in my opinion, because you really have to think of your own evidence, okay, and it involves critical thinking, and it kind of is a reflection of your sphere, your world. If your world is so like short-sighted, you only know about like your school and your own little bubble, then you're going to be limited. But if you can tie in like the broader situation of what's happening in the world or in our country, or what's happened in nonfiction that you've read, then or history, then you're going to be looking good for this FRQ. The synthesis, like we talked about, is an argument with sources. This one, there are no sources. AP equals answer the prompt. That's the key. Okay, read the prompt closely and do each task. Sometimes the prompt will ask you to do multiple tasks. Sometimes there are 2 tasks. Sometimes there are 22. Just kidding. There has never been 22 tasks. But then sometimes there has been 3. There has been 3. So you want to make sure you do all 3. Okay. Usually it's just 1 or 2 tasks, but reading the prompt closely, making sure that you understand the key instruction words, it's super important. I have this thing I got from our AP Euro teacher here. It's called the chicken foot. I think it works pretty well for sort of brainstorming your evidence. And then I invented my own thing because we live sort of close to the beach, the acronym BEACH, BCH. So before you dive in and start BSing your argument like I did in high school, you don't want to do what I did in high school. Take 5 minutes to BCH your argument instead and leave 40 minutes to write. Okay, so the B is for books. Think about books that could be used as evidence for the argument. The C is current events or cultural examples. So you want to be up on what's going on in the news. And then the H is historical examples. And that's going to be easy for you if you're taking AP history class. Here's the chicken foot itself that I got from Miss Thompson, our AP Euro expert here. So I just kind of adapted it, and you're going to do your position on this line right here. And I like to craft my position although plus concession plus position. Okay, so you're admitting 1 point, you're giving 1 point to the other side, then you're giving your position. And then I'm going to put a concession tied to an example here if I can think of one. And this, again, this is just my brainstorming. I'm just going to jot down this quick chicken foot or type it, and then I'm ready to go once the writing period starts, or once I'm ready to write. And then the second prong here is a subclaim tied to a strong example, and then another subclaim tied to a strong example. So I've got 2 strong examples, I've got a couple of concessions, and I've got my position all good to go. It's ready. Okay, so the key here is to make sure you have vivid and convincing examples you think you can build a paragraph around. So each of these, if you go back, each of these prongs is a potential paragraph. Okay, sorry. So let's say my example here is Devil's Highway. That's a potential paragraph. I'm going to write a paragraph and use Devil's Highway, the nonfiction book by Louis Urea, as my support. And here my other example is Fast Food Nation. I'm going to use Eric Schlosser's book as my prime example and build a paragraph around that. So it could be 2 related examples in one cohesive paragraph. I could even put Devil's Highway and Fast Food Nation together. I could put Sun Also Rises and Great Gatsby together. I could put 2 current events together. I could put 2 historical examples together. Or I could separate them. If each book or each historical event ties to a separate subclaim, then I'm going to make it a separate paragraph. Just like my 8th grade essay, each paragraph is built around one subclaim. Be better than the gap. Write a convincing argument. This is my joke from the Steve Carell movie, Crazy Stupid Love. But A sort of gap level argument is like, okay, here's my thesis. Okay, here's my two examples. And one is probably an invented instance that I made hypothetical evidence, and one is an anecdote about my little bubble. Okay, that sort of gap level argument, you want to be better than the gap, and you want to write a convincing argument. In order to do that, you want to use BCH. Think back to the books you've read. Okay, all these crazy English teachers have assigned to you the last 3 years. Maybe you could tie Romeo and Juliet. Maybe you could tie in Fahrenheit 451. Maybe you can tie in Atticus and To Kill a Mockingbird, Gem and Scout. You could tie in Orwell and talk about 1984 and Big Brother is Watching. You could talk about nonconformity and Holden Caulfield. You could talk about racism and Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail. You could talk about the id within each of us and the id, ego, and superego and William Golding's Lord of the Flies. You could discuss racism and segregation and literacy and slavery and Douglas. You could talk about corporate America and fast food nation. You could talk about the lost generation with Gatsby or The Sun Also Rises and existentialism. Devil's Highway, illegal immigration, what immigrants are coming here for and what the incentive is and what the risk is and what the trade-off is for both countries or both continents. You could talk about Scarlet Letter and tie in Hawthorne. So lots of options. Okay, you might think like, oh, I can't really think of a book, but you could always tie in a book that you've read in school. The lingo for the rubric is pretty clear. They want adequate evidence that is clearly explained. So I'm just going to reiterate this over and over and over again. The stronger your examples, the stronger your argument. And the inverse is true. The weaker your examples, the weaker your argument. Okay? So they want, here's more of the rubric. They want you to discuss and articulate the implications or limitations of an argument. That's the concessions part. You could organize your argument with the concessions up front, okay, like the first prong in that chicken foot, and have multiple, and I like to do C and C, concede then counter. Or you could incorporate your concessions and counter arguments throughout the essay, so whichever one you're more confident in doing. But you want to recognize that the College Board is trying to give you a prompt that is complex. It's not necessarily black and white. Okay, so keep that in mind. Try to tie it to a broader context. That's maybe the C. Maybe there's a current event or a cultural example that's happening in our society that you could talk about. That would encompass the broader context. And then, of course, number 4, down here, style. Okay, is it vivid and persuasive? Are your examples persuasive? Is your style persuasive? Are you using parallel sentences, building up to your point with a NAFRA and a short, simple declarative with your claim or your subclaim? Are you building momentum with the art of your writing? So these are the things that can help you get the sophistication point. That's the coveted one. Okay, remember, don't BS your argument like I did in high school. Use BCH or some variation. It doesn't have to be a book, a current event, and historical example. It could be a book. It could be a current event, historical example. It could be historical, book, cultural. It's up to you. I hope this is helpful. Good luck to you on your argument FRQ. Okay, it is the most challenging because you have to brainstorm your evidence. You can do it.